Hey, what is going on, guys? I think it's about time I finally show you my IRL build for Ancient Gears. This is the build that I bring to all my locals and regionals, and I usually come to terms with the fact that I'm the only Ancient Gear player there. But let's get it started. So, the first two monsters, or first two cards we got here are Ancient Gear Reactor Dragon. This is basically your go-to card when it comes to back row removal because it can be special summon from basically anywhere. And its tribute effect you're never really going to use, but hey, if you want to tribute an Ancient Gear monster, it gets piercing. And it's pretty easy to get two of these on the field, and since they're level 9, it's a very easy calamities. Up next, we have count them, four Ancient Gear Golems. I know this seems like the brickiest thing you've ever seen in your life, but I have multiple ways of sending this thing either from hand to graveyard or from deck to graveyard, so they usually don't end up, burning a hole in my hand that often. And the one ultimate pound is mainly because of its destruction effect, where I get to float into a poly and then perhaps like maybe one, maybe two Ancient Gear monsters in my hand so I can recover with a howitzer. Up next is our first set of non-Ancient Gear monsters. We just have two Thunderbirds. This is literally the only danger monster I run, mainly because of its level, so I can get into more rank 8 Xyz, and also just because sometimes their back row can mess with me, so I just got some back row removal too. And then we got, just in case, the one Pankratops. This is, obviously it's just a Pankratops. You never know when, especially with a go second deck, you can just get a free monster on the field, and then I'll usually just hold on to it until my opponent starts doing some funny business and get rid of it. Now we're going all the way from level 7 all the way down to level 4 with our first level 4 a set of Ancient Gear Wyvern. This is basically the best monster in the main deck because it can search out any Ancient Gear card. Not monster, not back row, everything. It can be anything, any card you want. And it's a decent beat stick too in case because this card tends to get ashed pretty often. Up next, we have a set of Ancient Gear Frame. This is pretty much your box target, which we'll talk about in a minute here. It's a decent beat stick, and then also its discard effect allows you to toss cards such as Golem or Catapult into grave for future plays in order to draw into either Fusion or another Golem. Up next, we only have two Ancient Gear boxes because I pretty much will almost always just use it as search material off of Wyvern, because when this is added to hand, I get to add Frame because it's a Earth machine monster with 500 attack or 500 defense. And also that effect can go off with Ultimate Pound too. If I add Poly, then add Box from Grave, I can then add a Frame from deck, which can lead me into Howitzer. And then our final level 4 is a one-off. It is Elemental Hero Prisma. I know this is kind of out of left field, but with its effect, you're able to reveal Ultimate Ancient Gear Golem from your deck, send a Golem to grave, and then its name becomes Ancient Gear Golem. Now, that can often get negated, but for cost, I can still send that to grave for future plays. And if this doesn't get negated, I can use a turn 1 Ancient Gear Fusion from deck. And then our final monster is a just a level 3 Ancient Gear Hunting Hound. This is basically a poly on that can punch people. It's normal. Its burn effect is decent. It's just on the summon, burn for 600, and then you get to fuse. So it's just great to be able to draw into something that can both punch and fuse into larger monsters. All right, so that is it for monsters. I know there's definitely some other Ancient Gear cards that I could be running, but with all of them being for a much older play style, a lot of these cards can become very outdated, which is why these new support cards definitely can bring Ancient Gears back into relevance. So up next, we got our spell cards. So we're going to start off. We have 3 Gear Towns. Basically, you want this to resolve on the field, and then you want to get rid of it as fast as possible. It's the whole tribute for one less effect you're rarely going to use. Its main effect you want to use is just on destruction, special summon from hand, deck, or graveyard, any Ancient Gear. Only problem is it does not ignore summoning conditions, so if you have a fusion monster in grave, or ultimate or chaos in the grave, or if you have a golem in your deck, you're basically not going to be able to touch it. But it's still a great card just to toss on the field, and hopefully your opponent misreads it and it can just pop it immediately. Then up next is probably the best card in this deck. It's Ancient Gear Fortress. I run 3 of them. This basically allows you to, during the turn Ancient Gear summon, they get almost complete protection. They can only be destroyed by battle. They can't be targeted by card effects or destroyed by card effects. And with this card on the field, if you activate any Ancient Gear effect, whether it be monster, spell, or trap, your opponent cannot respond to them. They cannot hand trap it. They cannot chain do it in any way. They couldn't even use some card that doesn't even affect you in any way. So, and then also, that's an effect that your opponent may want to get rid of, so they'll pop this card. Well, this card allows you to special summon an Ancient Gear from hand or graveyard, so it's alright too if it gets popped. And then, probably the second best back row card we've got is 3 of Ancient Gear Catapults. Now, as much as I love my trebuchets, this card is amazing. It allows you basically to pop Gear Town when you control no monsters, and you get to basically double special summon, because this one allows you to special summon ignore summoning conditions from deck, and then you get Gear Town's effect. And then with Fortress on the field, you get to basically do this summon for free, and while they can chain to this one, you get this one for free. And even if you target Fortress, Catapult's effect can still not be chained to. And then it also has its Banish effect that allows you to pop a card while you control monsters to get a token, and then most likely a special summon because you're going to be popping these two. The only downside is that those 2 effects cannot be activated during the same turn. You can only activate one of them at a time. Alright, so now we're on to our fusion cards. So first off, we're running 2 power bonds. This will basically guarantee your OTK because of the amount of attack power that Ancient Gears bring to the table. This can just basically double it. And then you're not really worried about taking the damage the next turn, because if you don't OTK that turn, you're already most likely going to lose because of the lack of protection that Ancient Gears have. So you might as well just go big or go home. And then up next, we have the Archetype Fusion card, Ancient Gear Fusion. I only run 2 of them because what sucks about this card is that it can be ashed, because while controlling an Ancient Gear Golem or Ultimate Pound, you can send material from deck. That basically means you can get a very easy Megaton or Chaos out in the field. But no matter what, even if you're only using 2 material in your hand to get Howitzer, this can still be ashed. So you gotta make sure you have Fortress on the field so they can't chain to this. And then we got our one-off of Poly, because I really wouldn't run this, but because of Ultimate Pound's effect, this can basically show up in my hand for free. But then if I top deck it and I can't use Ultimate Pound's effect, I can still fusion summon at least. And then we just have our miscellaneous back row cards just to help us out. We have 1 MST. That'll most likely never see my opponent's side of the field. I'll almost always use it to pop Gear Town. I always find it funny that I have to let my opponent know that I am not chaining to Gear Town's activation to use MST, because that will absolutely miss this timing, and that's why I hate this field spell sometimes. And then the reason I'm not worried about running 4 Golems is because I run Trade-In, so it's an easy resource dumper, because they are level 8, so you can just dump them into Grave and then draw 2. I've even sometimes used this against, I've used this with Thunderbird to just dump it in Grave, draw 2, and then pop a back row. And then we just run 2 of Called by the Grave, because getting hand trapped is the worst thing in existence, especially when you have a easy OTK strat that all you need to do is search 1 more card and then Ash Blossom shows up, so it's just an easy way to get rid of it. Alright, and then there's our spells, and we have, actually, funny enough, in a Go-2 deck, Go second deck, we have just 3 trap cards here, and those are basically just later game plays, just in case you can't get no TK off, but your opponent can't pummel you to the floor right away. We're starting off with 1 Ancient Gear Reborn. This is basically the oh shit button, just in case you can't really get into anything else, because you can actually special summon Howitzer or Wyvern off of this, and then get into more searches or more special summons later on. So it's just a decent card that I usually just side out game 2, but sometimes it comes in handy. And then we have, actually, I didn't expect to love this card so much, but I absolutely love this card. It's Necrofusion. So the reason I love dumping resources into the grave is because during my opponent's end phase, I can just use Necrofusion to bring out Chaos. And I'll have to look into the rulings. I believe because it's a summoning condition, Chaos could not attack the turn it's summoned, similar to how, even though it's unaffected by spell and traps, Power Bond's effect still goes in because it's part of the summoning condition. So I don't believe Chaos could attack the turn it's summoned, so I can't use this during my turn if it's set. But I just usually use it as the oh shit button, just in case I can I can banish resources from grave and then get a decent monster out. Alright, now the best part about Ancient Gears, the extra deck. Now, funny enough, I don't run a single Link monster. I don't see a reason to. I was tempted to do Platinum Gadget, but I never really went with it. So we're going to start out with a couple Xyz. So I actually don't use this card a lot. I was just told to try it out, and I've just never really gotten to use it at all. So it kind of just sits here and just burns a hole in my extra deck, and I don't think it'll ever see play. I'll probably remove it in the future. Up next, we have Lancelot. Now, Lancelot isn't really that good of a card. It's a cool attack directly, and then it has a negate that's mandatory. It just says when a player activates an effect, detach and negate. So it's kind of an interesting play. So you can easily stop an opponent if you just can't get into anything else. You can just at least once per turn negate one of their effects. So it doesn't get that much play, but it definitely gets more play than this guy over here. And up next, the staple rank 8, we got Hope Harbinger. I mean, this is, just obviously one of the best rank 8s out there. I mean, you can just steal any, negate and steal any spell card on the field if you want to. So this is usually just a good go-to if you just can't get into a play and you have, let's say, like a howitzer or a golem or 2 golems on the field just taking up space. And then we're moving on to our rank 9s. Obviously, like I said before, you can get into calamities very easily with if you use Catapult and Gear Town to get into 2 Reactor Dragons. You can easily get into calamities. And so, obviously, it's just it's calamities. It's a phenomenal card just to be able to lock your opponent from doing anything. And then a card that I was told to run by somebody from Regionals who I was playing against. He just handed me this card, but I've yet to use it at all. I have Infinity Shack Earth Slicer. It's actually a really cool card to use. It's just I don't think it's worth it. I'd rather have 2 Reactor Dragons on the field than Earth Slicer. But I'm still gonna hold on to it at least for the time being. We'll see. We'll see if it ever actually gets any play. So onto our fusion cards. We now have. They're out of order now. We have probably my favorite fusion monster. We got 3 howitzers. The wombo combo that we usually joke about on stream is howitzer burn pass. If I can't get into a good play at all, I'll usually just summon howitzer, use its effect to burn, and pass to them, because howitzer basically can only get kaiju'd or destroyed by battle. He's completely unaffected. Now the downside is your opponent still can mess with him a bit because he can be targeted, so you can still equip him with stuff. And so, like, for example, like bamboo swords, you can still equip him with stuff, and then you can go into plays. But other than that, I'll usually just slap him in defense mode and then special summon ultimate pound off of him so I can get Poly later on. Or sometimes I'll even summon Wyvern off of its effect because it says ignore summoning conditions. That's the best part. You can summon literally any Ancient Gear monster from your deck. But I usually end up going into ultimate pound. So up next we got 3 Megatons. Now Megaton's great because of how generic it is. So it's 3 Ancient Gear monsters, but 3300 ignore back row, no piercing isn't really that good on a monster. So what you want to do then is usually use Ancient Gear Fusion to use materials from the deck to get into 3 Golems, because it can attack up to the number of times Golems were used as fusion material. That's both Golem and Ultimate Pound. So, and especially if you manage to even only using 2 of them as material, if you can power bond into this is basically a free OTK, because you can get 6600 attack 1, 2, even 3 times. So, and the best part is that this card can float into the next one we're about to talk about. So it's 2 of them, Ultimate Ancient Gear Golem. Now, I'm never really going to fusion summon this thing outright. It's usually almost exclusively going to be special summoned by Megaton. That's just because it's, 4,400 attack, piercing, ignore back row. It's a decent card. I've power bonded into it once or twice just to get a game win, but I'm usually never going to outright fusion summon this thing. It usually can get special summoned off of Megaton. And the best part is, so I can float from Megaton to Ultimate. And then if Ultimate gets destroyed, I get to float into a Golem, so I can hopefully just repeat the process over and over again. And then finally, our big bad boss monster, Chaos Ancient Gear Giant. This is easily one of, if not the best cards in this deck. It's it's generic. That's the cool part. It's not that stupid anime version that you need all the hunting hounds for. And it's unaffected by back row, so you couldn't... So you can't even steal this thing for like starving venom with super poly, because I can't even use it as fusion material. And then during the battle phase, you can't use monster effects. So basically, if you have lightning, or if you have honest or honest Neos, that's just not going to happen. It's no matter where the monster is, you can't activate monster effects while this guy's on the field during the battle phase. And then it just attacks all and does piercing. So if your opponent has something, let's say for example, like crawlers or shadows, where like they have flip monsters, you can basically just wipe their field and they can't activate any of their flip effects when you're just completely board wiping them. And then going into Power Bond with this thing basically guarantees a win if they have at least 2 monsters. And that will be the that's going to be the extra deck here. And then up next, our side deck could definitely use some work. It's definitely, I would say, a work in progress. There's a couple of cards that I will almost never side in, so I might have to remove them. But I'll take some suggestions in the comments below for how I can modify this thing. So first up, we have our second and third Pankratops. This is obviously just in case my opponent just has some cards that I need to get rid of before I can start my plays. And then up next I'll just pair them all together. My 3 back row cards, just 1 MST and 2 Twin Twisters. I mean, this is obviously if I can't, like if I'm not drawing into Catapult, and also it doesn't help that Catapult can be ashed, but you obviously can't ash these cards. So if I want to get rid of my own card, I mean, I understand they can still ash the Gear Town special summoning, but this is also just in case I have to get rid of their back row as well. Actually, put these 2 separate. And then up next we have our third Called by the Grave. I actually used to run 0 Pankratops and 3 Called by the Graves, but I learned that was actually getting a little bricky, so I ended up fixing it up a little bit. So I still have the same amount of each. I run 3 of each. It's just I'm running 2 of these in the main deck and then 1 of those in the main deck. And then this is going to seem a little weird. I side in 2 Ancient Gear Castles. This is basically because of Nick. Shout out to him. Whenever he plays Necros, he just has vanity monsters that can lock me out of special summoning. And what this does is that every time both me and my opponent normal summons or sets, we get to put a counter on this card, and then I can use those counters as tribute summons. So even if I have Gear Town up, this has 1 counter on it. I get to tribute summon, a Golem for no cost, and then get rid of that vanities. So that this will only ever see play if I get locked out of special summoning. And then probably my favorite card to side in, Magical Hats. Now the rulings on this are a little confusing because it hasn't been printed in Master Rule 4, but basically you can get a free Calamities out of Magical Hats, which sounds a little weird. So basically what you want to do is, if you can't get into a fusion monster because you have to use a main monster zone monster, you set this, you activate during your opponent's battle phase, and then you set 2 Gear Towns, and then you have your monster. No matter what, those spells get destroyed at the end of the battle phase, so you can chain those 2 Gear Towns together, and then you get basically 2 Reactor Dragons or whatever you want to get into. But if you do the 2 Reactor Dragons, that's basically a free Calamities. Right, and then we got 2 rivalries. This is just, because I'm running exclusively machines except for like Prisma and Pankratops and Thunderbird, which those really don't have to see the field. I can just side all those out. So this is basically if I'm running against anything that's like a mishmash of different types that I can just lock them out of playing. And, oh, well, of course, gotta have the 1 token. So that is going to be it for this deck profile. Just let me know if you guys have any changes you want in the description down below, and I will see you guys later.